Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films special episode, middle of the week episode. Had to bring on my friend James Ogden, second favorite Ogden of all time, next to Jonathan Ogden. Sorry for the joke, James, but I can't help myself with that kind of stuff. But of course, writes for Russell Street Report, the UK Ravens podcast, and he also has his own website, Red Star Baltimore. A man after my own heart, a scouted heart. There wasn't the Scouting Academy back in the day, James. You just had to intern and get people coffee and set up the big old TVs that they used to wheel in when it was a good day in class. I don't know if you had those over in the UK. Whenever you saw somebody wheel in the big TV and the VCR, you're like, yes, that's what you have to do as an intern back in the day in the NFL. But you went through the Scouting Academy. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time with the time difference out here. I know you were up late last night. What was it, 3 a.m. your time, and then had to get up with that beautiful baby of yours?
Yeah, I did. It was only a few hours sleep. You used to be able to do 3 a.m. and then sleep in take the day off work and sleep in for a bit. Not the case with a little one, but have to watch the Super Bowl, right? And I wanted to. I was warning people over here in the UK. There's hardcore, a lot of hardcore American football fans over here in the UK who watch the Super Bowl and appreciate it, but there's also a lot of fair weather American football fans who will tune in for the Super Bowl. And I got asked a lot at my work about the Super Bowl, and I was like, just be warned, okay? This is not the type of game where you're going to tune in and you're going to get like offensive touchdown. You're not going to get like all these splash plays and an amazing game. It's a game for the purists, this one. So just be patient with it. And I'm glad to see I was right. I enjoyed it.
Much the same over here, believe it or not. A lot of people, have parties and watch football. It's the only time they watch football all year is the Super Bowl, and they're interested in the commercials and the halftime show and all that other stuff. So it's not too much different. There's probably just more fans overall over here, but not too much different. James, by the way, if you recognize his face, popped up on my TV during my draft coverage and announced the Teddy Buchanan pick. James, I have to ask you about that live. What a thrill! How the hell did that happen? Like, what's the story behind that? And do you have any mementos or memories, or like, what did you take from it?
I do, and I don't have it up on the wall yet. I do need to put it up on the wall. But the UK Ravens got me a big signed a big jersey of Teddy Buchanan's with the draft card that I had to announce from, signed by Teddy, which the Ravens were kind enough to sort out for me, which is amazing. No, it was incredible. I've been involved with the UK Ravens for probably about the last 6-7 years now, doing various different things. Like I do all my stuff that I do, my draft guide and things. But like when the Ravens came over here, I was involved not necessarily as the head honcho, but as like a helper in terms of organizing lots of the events that we had when the Ravens came over for the London games, get to lots of meetups and stuff, and take part in the fantasy leagues that happen with the UK Ravens, and lots of stuff that I've done over the years as part of it. And obviously I'm on the podcast. And the Ravens told us that they were getting the marketing rights in the UK, which they were granted last year, and said they wanted to do a big thing to sort of to welcome it in. And the thing they wanted to do was announce a pick in London, and they wanted it to be one of us, the group of guys that have been doing stuff, organizing stuff for the last few years. And with the way I care about the draft and the things that I do, they felt I was a natural choice to do it. And it was just an amazing thrill and something I'll never forget, once in a lifetime type thing. So it was cool.
It's amazing, man. That's amazing. And yeah, like if anybody's a Teddy Buchanan fan out there, I know like channel member Chris loves him for different reasons, I think. But if he becomes a Hall of Fame player or something,
that would be amazing,
like,
wouldn't it?
For real. Like if I announce somebody's pick, I'm hoping that like, I don't know if I could analyze them properly without bias. It's just like, yeah, Teddy Buchanan, ride or die. I don't care if he leads the league in missed tackles. That's my guy. So yeah. James.
No, I was just gonna say I really struggle with watching him with any kind of like non-purple tinted specs. Like I'm always watching him thinking I try my best, and I do think he's got real talent, and I think there's a lot of potential with him. And I did think about it before, actually. Like I was sort of praying that when they handed me the card, actually I didn't get handed the card, they sort of told me, and I saw them write the name down on the card. And like I was praying that it was a guy that I knew that I'd done, I'd evaluated, and I had done Teddy, and so I was pretty thrilled about it, because I was a big Teddy Buchanan fan going into the draft. I thought he was a really nice fit for the Ravens in what they were looking for, and so like that was great. And so to see his name there, and there was also a relief that I'd spent about 4 or 5 days previously just reading all of the phonetic pronunciations of every player that could get picked around there, because I just didn't want to mess it up. So was grateful that it wasn't a difficult name to negotiate either.
Well, there's a guard we might take it at 14. And his first name I'm whiffing on right now.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm not going to attempt the full name.
So thank goodness. Yeah, thank goodness. But at least you know who Mike Vrabel is. You didn't call him Mike Verbal.
That's yeah. And there was also the possibility that pick might have been Shedeur Sanders, given some of the stuff that's come out since. And that
you could have been the Shedeur Sanders guy. That's right.
That would have been crazy. But glad that wasn't the case, actually.
All right, James. So this new coaching staff, I got to tell you, here in Baltimore, just around the people that I'm able to talk with, even like you're talking about, the people who aren't as hardcore into football, really don't care about the draft. Maybe they tune into the games. They got a nice Ravens flag in their front yard. They're excited about this Jesse Minter hire, the clearing of the coaching staff, the new philosophy. I'm calling it LJ Era 2, because it just feels like a new day here in Baltimore. And this coaching staff, it's going to change the way we look at players in free agency and in the draft. So, that's the reason I wanted to bring you on. You're a scouting guy. I'm a scouting guy. And when I'm looking at these players, you can't help but to look at them through just a little bit different lens, because for years and years and years, we knew exactly what roles the Ravens wanted, what stylistic fits there were. And now it seems like that's kind of turned upside down, and we have to kind of reevaluate that.
Yeah, I think it definitely does, Jason, right? Like, I think there's a few hires specifically that we'll get to where you think this really does change what they're looking for. But I think what'll be interesting as a sort of overall point to talk about first is like how it will change with Jesse Minter as the head coach. It does feel like he has a subtly different philosophy to Harbaugh in terms of what he's looking for from the types of players he's looking for, particularly on defense. And it feels like the notes that he's sending out there through the press conference and things do suggest that he's going to push back more towards a more traditional view of what a Raven was. There've been times over the last few years where I've started to, I think it was about 6-7 years ago where I really looked at Ravens draft trends at the point at which Eric DeCosta was taking over from Ozzie, and looked at what was going on. And I think they've changed quite a lot under Eric, but it's interesting to start learning that Harbaugh had these opinions in the draft room, and they were clearly being listened to. And obviously, we got glimpses of it where it would come out that he was a big Ben Cleveland guy, and that was why we drafted Ben Cleveland. But it feels like he had quite an influence over things. And while I'm not going to talk about the Boy Scouts that everybody thinks John Harbaugh was looking for, I do feel like Minter's sort of suggested that there will be a different archetype that they're looking for on defense, and it will go back to those types of Ravens who play really tough and are competitive, aggressive guys, and are not necessarily like, I'm sure they will continue to look at some of the things that they've looked at around explosive athleticism that seems to have crept in over the last 5-6 years. But I think it might raise back up again the importance of that connection to those traits that are more about sort of competitive toughness. Right. And I also think maybe to leave something on the for you as well is like, I think on the offensive side of the ball, it'll be really interesting to see. I think they've lost a little bit of the connection to the coaching staff over the last couple of years. And so it'll be interesting to see if that coaching staff now connects back to those scouts really well, which is something the Ravens have done well for years, but it feels like they've lost it a little bit in recent years on the offensive side of the ball.
I want to say that Harbaugh's influence to me, now I said this on the channel in the middle of the season on my weekly shows, tune in at 9 o'clock Eastern, or catch it on the replay if you're over there in the UK. But Harbaugh's influence in the draft to me has been evident for a long time. I mean, this man said without shame, I forget which draft it was, maybe 2021, that he drafted Ben Mason in part because it was his mother's favorite player at the University of Michigan, where his brother happened to coach. He said it without shame. And I'm thinking, even if that's not true, you just don't say it. And then we saw the power struggles with the New York Giants in finalizing that deal and having Harbaugh wanted to report directly to ownership, the control of the roster decisions. Quite frankly, James, my evaluation of John Harbaugh is there are a lot of things that he does great. He does well. There's a reason that he can manage over 100 people, but that CEO, the culture kind of started to crack. And I think part of the reason it started to crack is the players didn't believe in his personnel decisions. I think John Harbaugh, for everything he does well, kind of does the old George Costanza when it comes to personnel decisions. He'd be better off doing the opposite.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, and the thing I mentioned before, I think he's a big reason why there was a disconnect between the offensive coaching staff and the front office. Like there were, when you think about what happened on the offensive line over the past year and how they stuck to some guys when, to be honest, I felt like it would have been better to have moved on for the players themselves. Like,
right.
Like Falele and Voorhees continuing to play down the stretch in the way that they were. Now, I get that they possibly didn't have the in-house options that would work for them, but I don't really understand why you don't give one of those guys a few games off to go away in the lab and develop a bit more. Like, it just felt like it was the wrong choice for those guys, but it felt like it was just very single-minded, and it came from somewhere clearly. And I don't know that I think it's the type of decision, we're speculating here, right? But it's the type of decision that I feel Harbaugh may have been responsible for in terms of just sticking with that. And so
James, when you go to the off-season meetings and Harbaugh, Bisciotti, and EDC on the boat, they're coming up with a game plan for how we're going to fill out these rooms. And if, it's hard, I agree with you. It's hard for me to not envision Harbaugh saying, look, Voorhees is going to be fine. Falele's proven to be good. We'll bring back Ben Cleveland if we need. We don't want to play him, but if we need him, we can go to him. Just draft a young guy, and but we're going to roll with Falele and Voorhees. Like, that is not just Eric DeCosta's decision. It is very clear that John Harbaugh had an influence. And when Bisciotti was, decided to move on from Harbaugh, he gave EDC kind of a vote of confidence. So it's like Bisciotti was in those meetings. He knows who was standing on the table for Falele and Voorhees, and who was saying, hey, John, maybe we should add a free agent guard in here. So again, it's just like, yes, it's pure speculation, but we've been able to read through the lines for a long time, John.
Yeah.
James, excuse me, John.
Yeah.
John. No Harbaugh, sorry.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's interesting, right, watching the Bisciotti press conference and seeing him talk so explicitly about the coaching and so explicitly about the offensive line as well, that you can sort of read the tea leaves and think this is what was happening, that there was I don't want to give DeCosta too much of a pass. Like, I think that there's an interesting dynamic that if that did play out the way it did, that he would have to start thinking about, which is, it was interesting that Bisciotti said, like, I've set it up where it's both of these guys and I'll be the tiebreaker if there's ever a conflict. And there never was a conflict, so I never had to break the tie. Like, that is odd to me. And what that suggests is, it suggests a subordinate type relationship has established, and it's probably that the less experienced guy has sort of, been.
Harbaugh got his way. Got his way. He's
let the Super Bowl winning head coach be the guy to make the decisions, and so it'll be really interesting now where it is an absolute partnership with Minter and whether that changes things. And I think we can start to maybe. I definitely did start to judge DeCosta, I think, on some of these draft calls, and maybe that was wrong. Like, not in a bad way. I think in lots of good ways, right? With some of the calls he's made over the course of the draft in the last few years. But I wonder whether now is the time to be able to really judge Eric DeCosta and his tenure as a general manager. And it does feel like he's had a bunch of hits and he's had a bunch of stuff that would be right. But it feels like now is the time, without Harbaugh there, to say, okay, what is Eric DeCosta to the Ravens?
Yeah, 100% agreed. I think he defers too much. I would like to see him, instead of asking George Warhop what offensive lineman he likes, I would like to see DeCosta select that offensive lineman himself, being that he, built his chops. The reason he's a GM is because he was a great scout. So I want to see him take that draft room by the whats and to really take it over. So before we get into like how Minter would affect the staff or might affect the staff with the coaches he's hiring, Eric DeCosta in the draft, to me, and I want to get your opinion on this. I've seen a slight shift, not only from, okay, we're drafting guys from the Power Four schools, but to me, that's like a symptom of the NIL and everybody, all the talent being funneled to the top. What I've noticed is my main trend, I haven't talked to you about this at all, is that in the early rounds where I feel like a consensus is built and DeCosta is really putting his influence and fingerprints on this draft, especially in the first couple of rounds. I feel like he gets more deferry after that, to use a word that's not a word. But Hollywood Brown, Patrick Queen, Adafio Way in 2021, even Linderbaum, undersized guy, Nate Wiggins, Malachi Starks. There's not a guy whose game is built on physicality in there. It's all like a lot of guys with speed, range, quickness, whatever category you would fit their position group into. There's a lot of finesse. Roger Rosengarten in the second round, David Ajabo in the second round. A lot of guys whose game is built on speed. And that's what I get from DeCosta compared to the Ozzie years, where it was like year after year, we're drafting the biggest, baddest, roughest, toughest mofo in the draft.
Yeah, and Nate Wiggins was the one who was like finally instructive for me. Like I'd started to feel that, like you had. And then when he drafted Wiggins, I did not think they were going to draft Wiggins. I thought that was not going to be I could see, you can see the coverage skills. Everyone can see the coverage skills. Obviously, everyone can see the speed. There were things that I thought about him as a corner where I've seen some growth since he's come into the league, but I've also seen some things play out the way I thought they would play out from his Clemson tape. And, at the moment, he projects as a solid second corner on a team, right? As a good second corner on a team. I don't know that he's a top lockdown guy right now. Well, he certainly isn't right now. He's had stretches of some poor play, I would say, but stretches of really good play. And so at the moment, the jury is still out on Wiggins for me, with some promising signs for the future, but I don't know that he's ever going to be a top 10 corner, which is what they sort of talked him up as when they first took the guy. But the main thing that was strange for me about the Wiggins pick was that, and I don't want to ding the guy too hard, but I have seen this on tape in the NFL now as well, was his tackling. And it was tough to see him front up against a bigger ball carrier and make a tackle. Like I looked at this guy and I was like, this isn't a tough, gritty guy. Like he's a pure cover corner and he's very good, but he's not a guy who's going to stick his nose in the run game and make plays. Like the last first round corner they drafted, Marlon Humphrey, was a tough guy. Like he was, and so it was a big departure from that. Jimmy Smith was a tough guy too, right? It was a big departure from that. And so it did sort of say to me, okay, this is definitely a move now in terms of what they're looking for. And they don't necessarily have that grit and toughness as high up they used to talk about grit, right? They used the word grit like 8-10 years ago as something they specifically looked for, and they don't use it as much anymore. I've not heard it used recently. And I think you're right. They've looked at athleticism in a far greater way in recent years. And
in the early rounds. In the early
rounds. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, they've certainly drafted some heavy tone setters later in the draft. And it's interesting that some of those guys feel like they fit a bit better. Like I have high hopes for like a guy like Tavius Robinson next year. And so it'll be really interesting to see if Minter does. I feel like the way Minter's, it's only really early, and we've only heard a few words from him, but the things he's talked about what it means to play like a Raven tend to suggest that he's thinking more in the way that we thought previously, which is makes sense because that is what he grew up with in Baltimore, right? That is what the identity that he's used to in Baltimore from his time here a decade ago.
So I want to talk about Jesse Minter, the tactician, what you've seen from the Los Angeles Chargers defense the last couple of years. That's what I've been studying. I haven't gone back to his Michigan days, but I mean, for those of you who don't know, this is a Chargers unit that, people like James and I who studied the draft and watch how players develop from what they were in college. I mean, Jesse Minter got a ton out of this coaching staff. I mean, Ravens fans, Tony Jefferson had 4 interceptions last year for the Chargers. 4. They gave up 16 touchdowns as a pass defense unit and had 19 interceptions. So more interceptions, takeaways than they gave up touchdown passes with guys named Dante Jackson, who we've seen in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, not an all-star corner. Tarheeb Steele at the other corner, 5th round pick, bigger, stronger, but again, not a hot commodity, not a Nate Wiggins first round pick here. This is the 5th round guy. Some of the production that they have gotten out of the Chargers defensive backs the last 2 years have been just unbelievable. So James, we talk about stylistic fits. I'm really excited to see a pass defense that will be pretty much the exact opposite of what we saw the last 2 years with the passing yards allowed and the touchdowns allowed.
Totally agree. I think there's a few things to say. So let's start with, I think there's a myth in the NFL that for people who sort of watch college prospects, not you and I, but there's certain people who watch college prospects and say, oh, when he gets in the league and he gets NFL coaching, this will change about him. That's a bit of a myth. They don't have the practice time from the CBA to be able to actually develop these guys. Sometimes the ways in which players develop is when they develop in the offseason on their own with their own personal coaches. They don't necessarily get that in the building. And so sometimes it's about that person and how they're able to develop themselves and grow themselves and their growth mindset. The thing that I think you get with Minter first and foremost that's really the most important is a teacher. And this is the thing that I loved about Mike McDonald, and it was, I think it was RG3 who put out a post on X last night about really struggling going up against McDonald's defense for a couple of years in Baltimore as the scout team quarterback. And what he mentioned was that the players are in position to call their own pressures, stunts, games themselves live in play. And so while a quarterback can be right at the line when they make an assessment about and set their protection, they're actually wrong still because it's changing all the time. And the autonomy and the power is given to the players in McDonald's scheme. Minter is exactly the same. And I've seen the same types of, you've mentioned that the players that have developed. I think a lot of it is putting them in positions to be successful and teaching them well how to be successful in that position, minimizing their limitations. Emanwari is a great example of Mike McDonald having done that in Seattle. I think Emanwari has played 2 snaps deep this year, which is why I was dead wrong on him as a draft prospect, because I was evaluating him as a traditional safety. He hasn't played traditional safety. He does not play deep at all. And Minter does the same thing with the players that he has. He fits the scheme around those players, and he puts them in positions to be successful, and he teaches them. And so every time you see, and this is a really key thing, I think, with this type of defense, which Zach Orr has tried to run at times over the last couple of years. But one of the biggest failings of the Zach Orr defense, I think, has been that when he's run these simulated pressures, there've been so much breakdown on the back end, so much miscommunication that they've got hit for big plays. And it's so crucial when you're doing those simulated pressures, when you're dropping guys in coverage who aren't used to it, when you're bringing guys on the blitz who aren't used to it, it has to be taught really fundamentally well. And otherwise it breaks down, it falls apart. And I think that's the thing I've seen with Minter so consistently with the Chargers defense, is that everything is buttoned up perfectly on the back end. Everything is played exceptionally well. And we can get into it a bit more, but the scheme specifically, they run a lot of zone, but they sprinkle in man very effectively when they do. And the zone coverage is a bit more of a thing of beauty than it's been in the last couple of years in Baltimore. It's harking back to that time with McDonald where, their quarters coverage, their cover 4, their cover 6, their cover 8. It's really great coverage, and the way that they run it is perfection, and the way that he runs the late rotations is exceptional. It's a thinking man's defense, and he teaches it very well. And so I can see, I think it would be a real upset if there isn't a real tangible improvement in year 1 and even more so into year 2 under Minter.
Yeah, a lot of people like to say Zach's scheme. This player wouldn't have worked in Zach's scheme, and I think scheme is just the incorrect word. It's semantics, but they're all running the same type of schemes. They're all running a lot of the same zones. It's the way it's coached. It's the way it's taught. It's the emphasis put on. It's a lot about spacing, and it's a lot about timing. And there were just too many times over the last 2 years where it didn't. I was kind of harsh in saying that it didn't look like we practiced. It didn't look like we practiced. It was the end of the half in the first game against Buffalo is a perfect example. What the heck was that supposed to be? It sticks coverage, kind of looked like it. Were two guys supposed to rush? I doubt it. It's just like it didn't look like this defense has been on the same page. And if you want to play faster, if you want to play more physical, the root of that, the base of that, is to be on the same page and to be organized and have good timing, a well-timed defense. And I think Minter is going to bring this. So James, in the defensive back room, um, I'm not sure what's going to happen with Marlon. We got Mike Mickens, by the way, from Notre Dame. Excellent position coach there in his development. I mean, man, you look at the way Xavier Watts was playing free and getting to the point in which he could bait quarterbacks, where Malachi Starks was always in the right position all year. I thought he did a great job with his positioning and his eyes and his progressions, but he wasn't like taking it to the next level to where he could bait a quarterback, to think the quarterback has something, give it and take it away, like we saw with Xavier Watts, a Mike Mickens prospect. We saw Benjamin Morrison, a lot of defensive backs playing above their head at Notre Dame. So what kind of, like, when we look for it, we're probably going to draft a corner. I mean, we'll have TJ Tampa signed up. We'll have Nate Wiggins signed up. You got the two young guys coming back, three young guys, really. Kone, Longer Beam, Keon Martin, but still there's not a lot proven there. Will Marlin be back? We're not sure. What kind of cornerback, or how does the Minter system maybe change the way, what kind of cornerback are we looking for here?
Yeah, I think it changes it in very subtle ways, right? But I think the thing to think about, so first of all, there's an interesting thing to talk that I think will be a talking point within the room, which is, and they're going to be a little bit gun shy about this because of the lack of development they saw over the past year in certain players. But what do you see from Nate Wiggins? Like, do the Ravens see him as a future number one corner? Like, do they see him as the guy down the stretch and a guy that they would extend? If they do see him as that, then I think it changes the priority of the corner position in the draft. And it doesn't necessarily take it off the board at number 14, but it doesn't raise it in terms of importance. If they don't see him as that and they see him as a good corner and it was a good pick, but they could get an upgrade at the corner position and add the depth that they need, then the position is squarely in pay at 14. And then I think you're looking at, I mentioned, so I think it was the Chargers using zone coverage at the 7th highest rate in the league. And it wasn't that wasn't insignificant. Like that was they were in the top users of zone in the NFL last year. So I think what it does, and I don't necessarily think that this is a huge change over the past couple of years, but I think what it does is it just does make you raise up even more possibly the processing element. I always slip in and out of American English.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Less physical skills, less about the 40 you run and how quickly you see things and how smart of a football player.
Exactly.
How fast you process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing that they will have to look at is the fact that they ran a lot of light boxes and a lot of heavy defensive back use. And so you have to get a physical guy who can tackle. Like you cannot be stuck on the outside in a Minter defense with two corners who have questionable tackling ability. They are going to have to, and that was a real problem down the stretch with the Ravens. Was those missed tackles, not just from Wiggins but from others too, and some guys that won't be here anymore. But they have to get guys who are physical and can tackle, and so that's raised up a bit in importance, I think. So I think both football smarts, football intelligence, how quickly they process the game, how quick their trigger is, how well they read receivers, how well they play in zone. And obviously that's a specific thing to be looking at in zone, how intelligent they are, how do they read the quarterback, can they peripher routes, like that kind of stuff is going to be really important, married with hopefully some more physicality, some more toughness and ability to insert against the run, which they're going to need, I think.
So I agree with everything you said there. And I'm extending this to the safeties as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty clear we're going to need somebody to fill Alohi Gilman's shoes because unlike Zach Orr, Jesse Minter sees that Kyle Hamilton's pretty darn good around the line of scrimmage, and you should probably start with that as your base plan. One of the many head-scratching decisions from Zach Orr that I just can't believe it. Like you really waited until you had to trade for a safety before you realized. I wonder whose idea that was in the offseason. Was that DeCosta's? Was that Harbaugh's? What was the plan? Did they ask Zach? But anyway, sorry for the cheap shots. Where I'm going to back you up, so I back you up on all that. Their ability to play zone. You don't need a 4-2 guy. You need a guy who understands spacing. You can man up every once in a while. And the other team has slower receivers too, so maybe they're just good out of their breaks and their spacing is good. What I think this means for the draft is, James, is that let's say I have an even grade on somebody, or maybe even a slightly higher grade on a cornerback as compared to an edge rusher. I'm going with the edge rusher. And then the reason is I've always been a stickler for speed and being able to play man coverage because when times get tough, you have to, you have to blitz and really trust your cornerbacks. But seeing what Minter has got out of guys and Mickens has gotten out of guys, and I think Nate has all the physical skills to be that man up corner that you need. I feel like this kind of lessens the priority for a corner. I mean, dude, they did it with Dante Jackson and Tarheeb Steele. Are the guys we have on the roster right now were better prospects than those guys coming out. They just need to be coached well. They need to be on the same page. They need to be on a string, as Ed Reed used to say. And as far as the strong safety goes, we need a physical, tough, rough rider, smart rough rider. Even if it's a Chuck Clark level type player who you bring in, you could start him year one. He's seen a lot of football. He is going to make plays. He can play dime back if you need him to. Box safety, he can play split field, so he can cover the half of the field. You're not going to ask him to play in the post and cover the entire back end by himself, but just a strong safety. That's kind of where I'm going with this, James, is that, we don't really need to spend premium picks on a cornerback when we have Nate Wiggins, Malachi Starks, Kyle Hamilton kind of anchoring that secondary. Let's get some smart, tough football players who can tack on. We can do that in day 3, day 2.
That's a really great point, Jason. I think there are specific circumstances under which I would consider a defensive back early, and it would need to be the right player, right? And so there is a circumstance where, and this would be deeply unpopular. I talked with Ken about this a couple of nights ago. This would be deeply unpopular, but if Caleb Downs fell to 14, what I think you could do is put Caleb Downs on the back end and have him play the post and have Starks play that more of a not traditional strong safety role, because I wouldn't want him down in the box all of the time, but they'll run a good amount of split field coverage, and so he's gonna stay deep a lot as well. But I think he has the thing that you need the most in that Chargers defense, in the Minter defense, and the way it was constructed with the Chargers, is someone with a really quick trigger and really solid tackling ability, and Starks has that in spades. And so I think he could thrive in a role that is less about playing the deep post with Minter and more about coming down a little more into the box on occasion. Obviously, he's not the biggest guy, so you don't want that happening all the time. But I think there's a world where you could pair those two on the back end and still have Hamilton as the third safety playing the nickel.
And I'm going to plug a video right here. Malachi Stark's highlights are up on the channel right now. I have highlights for every single Raven, and they're cut ups from the All-22 film. So this isn't like crowd shots and celebrations. To back up what James is saying here, Malachi Starks in man coverage and as a tackler exceeded my expectations. His size and physicality translated beautifully to the NFL level. Yeah,
I think so too. And I think the role I don't think it was why I was a little surprised when they drafted him. I felt like he was a better fit for what they needed than Imam Wari was. But I did feel like drafting him into a role where he plays deep post as much as he did early in the season was not the right role for him. I get that in his 23 film, that was a lot more of what he did. But I actually liked the 24 film, the film where he was asked to be more versatile and was asked to do some of those things. And so I felt like that would be the optimum role for him, playing a decent amount of deep post, basically taking advantage of his football intelligence, asking him to play a lot of different roles and be a lot of different people on the field for the Ravens. And one of those things is the physicality and the tackling. Like I felt like he had plenty of that. And so there is a world, right, where a defensive back is too good to pass up. And it would, like I said, it would be deeply unpopular with the fan base, but Downs is too good to pass up at 14, I think, over a number of different players. Like I would have a real problem, as much as I love Vega, who you mentioned earlier. I would have a problem passing up Caleb Downs to draft him. Like there's a world where it's a possibility, but I think you're right that with the way that Minter and Mickens have got the best out of players and PJ Volker as well.
Yes,
like it would make sense to me that maybe they focus a bit more on the defensive front, and the cupboard is really bare, right, outside linebacker. So that would make sense to me.
So yeah, and by the way, I'm a big Jermod McCoy fan coming off that ACL tear. You want to talk about a bad man at the cornerback position, a physical corner. Yeah, that guy's would be hard to pass up on too. But let's talk about that defensive front, James, for Jesse Minter. How does this change things for you? Obviously, Matabike is, the biggest unknown for us right now. But again, Tuli Tuipulotu, a guy that, I thought was more of a sub rusher, maybe couldn't handle an every down role. He comes out, they develop him to the point where, would he get 13 and a half sacks this year? Away, I think, had 7 in his time with the Chargers. So they have gotten production out of pass rushers. Khalil Mack, obviously, still doing his thing over there. I'm not sure. Like, for me, this is where I'm going to lean on you, because for me on the defensive line, I don't see any kind of like major shift in philosophy here, other than like, okay, Aeneas Peebles might get a chance to play because he doesn't have that dark cloud hanging over his head where you don't get a chance to develop on the field because you're too light and too small for John Harbaugh. But like, are we really changing the type of edge rushers that we're drafting, or is it more just complementing the room in which we have? Like, we need a 3 tech because we'll have John Jenkins, we'll have Travis Jones. So we need somebody who can get after the passer at defensive tackle. And then on the edge, I mean, we for me, I think we need a veteran first and foremost to kind of stabilize that room, and then go draft you another young guy. So yeah, do things change under Jesse Minter when it comes to evaluating what kind of players the Ravens should go after on that ever important, man, getting after that quarterback and stopping the run?
I think that the way it changes for me is it opens up the world of possibilities a little bit more. I think it allows you to look at players who played different roles on their college defense and are used to that. The Ravens for years, I did a bit of a study on defensive linemen that they picked it was a number of years ago now, but for a number of years under Ozzie, they would not take defensive linemen who hadn't proven they could 2-gap at the college level. They just wouldn't do it. They would never take a guy that couldn't 2-gap. And then in more recent years, especially when Anthony Weaver was setting the front in Baltimore, they were quite happy just taking anybody and putting them in their development program and their teaching program and saying, it doesn't matter to us that you don't Matabike didn't 2-gap very much at A&M. He was a 1-gap penetrating guy. And what they said was, let's bring him in and let's just set our front a bit more creatively and allow him to do the things that he can do really well. And I think over the Zach Orr years, if it had continued in this vein, I would have started, if I was DeCosta and the scouting staff, I would have started to adjust how I was drafting defensive linemen to more fit a bit more of an archetype, rather than just looking at guys and saying, we'll get him in the room and we'll work it out. He's a talented guy. And so a guy like, I think a really good example of this in this year's draft is a guy like Caleb Downs, who I'm not sure I would have considered under the previous regime. Now, I think I could understand, because the majority of the time at Florida, Caleb Downs is going to be a polarizing prospect. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the combine, but he's specifically talking about his role at Florida. He played 2-tech, 2-eye most of the time, and it was because of his lateral quickness. And I think the Ravens would shy away from a guy like that if they were trying to pick for the way in which they've played on the defensive front over the last couple of years. I think what happens now is they sort of say, okay, let's just get a talented guy in the room and then work it out afterwards because we've got the coaches to make this work. Because I think Minter, the thing for me with Minter that's really good about him is he's a problem solver. Like he looks at something and says, this isn't a challenge, this isn't an obstacle, this is a challenge, and I'm going to overcome it. And I've got this really talented football player that we've drafted in the first round. How do I incorporate him into my scheme? And that creativity is going to allow the Ravens, I think, to consider prospects on the defensive line that they wouldn't necessarily have considered before. I don't think it hugely changes things at edge rusher particularly, but I think it maybe changes things on the interior a little bit.
That's very fair, because, for years I could tell you who was not going to be drafted by the Ravens, who was going to be coveted. I mean, even in like the previous couple of years draft show, I'd say something like another team is going to see him as a fit and draft him way before the Ravens would consider him. And it has to do with the ability to two gap. That's the type of lineman that we have feasted off of and gotten a lot out of. But the game has changed. These picks and stunts are just crucial in today's games. The crash, spill and fill is what we used to call it, but basically crashing down on the inner gaps, the A gap, B gap, and flowing to the outside with your safeties and linebackers as a way of defense, defending the run game and putting pressure on the quarterback. All that stuff has kind of changed in the most recent years. So, so when we're filling out our defensive lineman board, we're not ruling out people because of their fit as quickly as we would say if this was even 4 years ago.
I agree. I think that you're going to want to see some glimpses of them being able to do it, as you would. Like you want to see them be able to hold up at you want to see them get their hands on early, lock out to gain leverage, able to play both gaps on occasion. But more often than not, if it's a guy who is penetrating, I think you're going to be. I think they're going to be more appreciative of that and more likely to draft them. I think it's just a key thing with the way Minter's scheme seems to have evolved with the Chargers is that they gamble quite a lot, like on rundowns. They really don't. They're not playing fundamental. They're not always playing fundamentally gap sound defense. They are gambling in the way that you've mentioned, and so you can fit in a guy who is more of a penetrator than of a guy that's too gapping.
Yeah,
so
we read the run. We're prepared. We think the run's going here, and we're going to crash that gap.
Yeah. And they do that particularly against gap runs. Like the way that I think they defended gap was definitely that. They would, if they were defending a gap heavy team, they would, and then sometimes it really blew back on them and they struggled. Like they weren't that efficient against gap runs. And so there were some games where they struggled. So it's not perfect, but it does dictate, I think, who you look at in the draft.
Yeah, and my last word on this is, James, we had at one point, we lost Matabike, obviously, and then we had Travis Jones, John Jenkins, CJ Okoye. So there's three, basically nose tackles on the roster. We had Brent Urban. Obviously, he's not going to put a ton of pressure on the quarterback. Okay, John, we got 4 nose tackle run stuffers here. It's time to activate Peebles, right? Nope. Going to Josh Tupou. Let's go. Let's get another gap filler in there. Like these kind of decisions from Harbaugh just really grinding my gears. Yeah.
And Peebles is a great example of what we've been talking about, right? Which is a guy who, you're going to have to find ways to hide him in certain parts of the game. And you're going to have to commit to using him in a specific way. And they just weren't willing to do that. And it's the thing I talked about before between the disconnect between the scouting and the coaching, that it was like they brought in a guy like Peebles. They should have had, I know he's a 6th round pick, but he's a talented 6th round pick. And as soon as they had the injuries they had with Washington, with Matabike, there should have been a plan for Peebles. There should have been a development plan for Peebles. He showed enough in the preseason flashes. And I'm not, I see lots of guys on Twitter being like, Peebles should be playing 30 snaps a game. He's a 6th round pick and there's a lot of talent there, but there's a lot of limitations. But the fact that they couldn't find a role for him that would help them I think is an indictment of the way that the coaching staff wasn't connected to the scouting staff in recent years. And
how about 10 to 12 snaps, 10 to 12
exactly.
snaps, end of the half, third down when you can substitute, maybe give them a series if this team just can't run the ball very well. There are plenty of ways to get him involved, and they just didn't. So anything else on the defensive side there, James?
No, only that I was going to say, I like when they're rotating in, I think what was the defensive tackle pairing at one point was Okoye and Taven Bryan. And I've got plenty of time for Okoye. Taven Bryan, I thought, was a disaster at times. And like the fact that you're not even running people's out on that sub package to me was crazy. And like I said, I'm not even like a big people's truther, but it just didn't make sense at that point. So yeah, let's move on before we both go.
Yeah, we get upset. Yeah, man. Like we had a Jabo and Urban on the edge, and yeah, dude, and yeah. So those are the kind of things that hopefully, with Minter, we can get more out of the players and be more open-minded. I think that's the summation here on the defensive side, is that we can pick the best player available, best pure football player, not the best in the zone scheme, best in a man scheme, best two gapper, best, one gap penetrator. Just get the best football player and we'll find a way to use them. Who else do we have in-house, and how can we supplement this roster to make sure we can do a little bit of everything? That's kind of the how I would sum up what we put on the defensive side there, James.
I agree.
So switching to offense, Dwayne Ledford, Declan Doyle. I'm going to throw it to you just with my opinion that I've expressed. Extremely impressed with Declan Doyle from the running game that he put together last year from the Bears. The passing game under the Sean Payton tree will come together. The creativity will come together. But what he got out of that Bears run game was super impressive. Now, of course, as our guy, Jim 20 Guys, Mr. Katz, says, you need the personnel on the offensive line to be able to run that. But I look at the Eagles game, James. Bears run for almost 300 yards. They found a way to minimize Jalen Carter in that game. They found a way to stay away from that Philly pass rush that they were obviously afraid of, the matchups between the corners, the DBs, and their receivers. And they were like, you know what? Our best pathway to win this game is to stick with the run, scheme away from their best player. And DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai ran for, I think it was 281 or something on the Philadelphia Eagles. And that game really sticks out to me. It was reminiscent of that Jackson 5 game in Los Angeles against the Rams when Greg Roman's offense erased Aaron Donald from the stat book. No set, not even a half a tackle for Aaron Donald that day. But just Declan Doyle's creativity, and then the addition of, dude, we're getting like the best, most qualified people at every position coach. Like, it's hard not to get excited. And I'm like, well, my overall attitude, James, is we'll wait and see. Let's not get too high or too low on these hires. But I found myself even getting caught up being like, really? We were able to get Dwayne Ledford. Okay. No kid. We were able to get Mickens. Really? Okay. We got Eddie Faulkner to coach the running backs. This is getting, and Joe Lombardi comes over, of course, to be the eye in the sky for Declan Doyle. This is ridiculous. Offensive line, though, is what it really comes down to, because your receivers are going to run the same kind of routes. You got a running back in Derrick Henry that can run any type of scheme that you want for him. What qualities on this offensive line do you think they're going to look at? First of all, we got two bookend tackles coming back. Ronnie Stanley coming back. Roger Rosengarten coming back. Tyler Linderbaum is a free agent. Would kind of be surprised, in my opinion, if they let him leave, since he's the only big name free agent. But these two guard spots are up for grabs. Emory Jones, probably a favorite for one of the guard spots. What kind of guards are we drafting here, James? Like, what does the scheme say for the guards? What does it say for Patrick Ricard? I have 1,000 questions on what our offense is going to look like on first and second down when the whole playbook is open.
Yeah, and I think Ledford's key, right? Because they hired Ledford before they hired Doyle. That tells you how highly they think of Ledford. And that's right. Like, it got to a point where they didn't care what offensive coordinator they were hiring. That offensive coordinator would be happy having Dwayne Ledford. It just so happens that they hired an offensive coordinator that fits well with Ledford and his run game that he's going to bring. But, when you look at the guys that you should trust on offensive line play, Duke Manyweather, Brandon Thorne, that we have access to, like as people that are not in teams. Like they spoke very highly of Dwayne Ledford, and it you know, it was just a stroke of luck, really, right? That Stefanski brought Bill Callahan with him, and Ledford ended up being out on the street. They clearly identified him very quickly as someone they wanted to bring in. What it does specifically, and zone versus gap is a bit overblown sometimes when it comes to player evaluation. Each team runs a healthy dose of zone. Each team runs a healthy dose of gap. The differences you should be looking for when you're evaluating players is, and I'm not preaching to the convert here with you, Jason, but like the things that you should be looking for is the different types of blocks, right? Which is, in inside zone, if you're running a lot of inside zone, you want to see a guy who works well in combination with other players and is able to climb to the second level. In outside zone, what you want to see is a guy who can reach block, which is a very different technique to getting out at the second level. So it's not just zone versus gap is not just big guy versus athletic guy, or the other way around, gap versus zone, big guy versus athletic guy. It's what types of blocks do you excel on? And the big change that we're going to see for the Ravens is a significant refocusing of their running attack towards outside zone. It has been a part of their game plan. It will be now the main part of their running game plan. And you have to think that was a deliberate choice that the Ravens made. Declan Doyle with the Bears ran close to a 50% outside zone offense. Ledford's was up over 60, depending on the different services you look at. So that's a really decent chunk of the running game is going to be outside zone. And so what that means, first of all, is that you've got to have the running backs to be able to do it. You've got to have the horses. Derrick Henry is one of the best outside zone running backs to ever play the game. So we're set there. The difference then is who are you going to run with? Who are your horses going to be on the offensive line? And at that point, they have to be guys who can reach block. They have to be good lateral movers. Obviously, you do want a guy who can move at the second level, because once they've laterally moved, you do want them climbing up to the second level. It's about getting that vertical movement. But realistically, the initial block, what you initially need to see happen is for a guy to reach a defender's outside shoulder and pin them inside. That is what you're looking for outside zone. And so reach blocks become really key. It's not something that I've had to focus on loads when evaluating offensive linemen for the Ravens in the past, because it's just not been a huge part of what they do. So reach blocks have never really rose to that level of importance. Well, we've talked about Vega. Yeah, I can never pronounce his surname. The Penn State guard.
Vega
Ione. Like Vega Ione is a really good example of this guy. I really love in pass protection. I think he excels in pass protection. I think he's good in the line of scrimmage and close quarters blocks and gap blocking. I also think he's pretty good working in combination. So he'd be fine in inside zone.
He can climb. He finds his landmark on the linebackers. He does,
especially when he's got. But he doesn't reach very well.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that's part of his skill set.
No.
But I guess my question would be: do you have room for one of those guys at right guard? Is it that big of a deal, or left guard? Say
you absolutely do. I just think there's an issue, right? Is that they can't. And I don't think they're going to, but they can't run out the same stuff over and over again. Like they can't do the same things they've done previously. Falele can't be on the team. Ben Cleveland can't be the backup plan at guard. Like you have to move.
Like me, even Voorhees.
Maybe even Voorhees. Like you have to move on. And so Stanley's fine. Rosengarten's fine.
I would say great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And Linderbaum could be outstanding. Like in an outside zone off. The reason why I thought we would lose Tyler Linderbaum is because I thought a Kyle Shanahan offense would go and absolutely bid up. They would bid up each other to get Tyler Linderbaum in the building, because you can weaponize him in a heavier outside zone scheme. And so maybe they do go and pay the little bit extra now to keep Linderbaum in the building. So Linderbaum's great too. You just got to move on from a guard perspective. And maybe you can get a guy like that and maybe teach him a little bit and you can live with it, especially as he's finding space. Like he's not like we've talked about. He's not like he's cumbersome and a real liability in space. So I think you probably can live with it. But I really want to get a guy. If you're going and getting a young guy in the draft, like I really want to get a guy who can do that. Like it feels like this is set up for a couple of years now, where the Ravens are going to focus a bit more on outside zone. Ledford's not necessarily going anywhere here, so it feels to me like, can we get a young guy who can really excel in that? and put him at one of the guard spots and forget about it for 3-4 years. Like that would be great.
So this is where I get torn up already, and it's going to bother me until the draft and before I set my board for real, because Emory Jones can reach block too.
Yeah,
Emory Jones looks good. So, I mean, some of the highlights that you see on the channel of Rosengarten and Stanley are doing exactly what you're talking about. They'll burst off, catch a guy, a gap over, and, get that little arm up and just seal him off. And it's beautiful to watch. And I don't think that a lot of people who watch it realize how hard that is to do. Not everybody can do that, but Rosengarten is great at it. Tyler Linderbaum's at another level when it comes to that kind of stuff. Ronnie can still move. Emory Jones can still move. So like the question in my mind, especially when it comes to Vega Ione from Penn State, is, okay, like, he's not Faalele.
No, that's the thing, right? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he's not like Faalele. You couldn't run that most of the time because you were just begging for the play to be somebody to penetrate and blow that thing up in the backfield.
Yeah.
Like if Vega's okay at it, a little bit below average at it, like, you might need a big butt kicker like him on some of the inside zone runs and some of the gap runs. Like, do we need a Vega on this line to balance out some of the smaller, lighter guys? Like, James, I'm going to be fighting myself with that because I can see both sides of the coin there up until draft day. Like, if I put it to you like that, like to paint the counter argument, be like, can we get somebody who's just okay at the outside zone run, but he can bring the versatility in other areas for us? And he, of course, is an outstanding pass blocker.
I think so. I think I can live with it. Like, don't get me wrong. I only used to pick at 14. I'll be fine. Like, I think I would hope that he's the fallback option, and they have 2 or 3 other guys that they hope fall to them and maybe do fall to them. But I would be fine with Ione at 14 because I'm with you on that, right? And I think the thing you want, I think the thing the Ravens need on the offensive line, more than talking about what scheme fit, like you said, we can't have a Faalele in this scheme. It isn't going to work. So you have to find a normal offensive lineman for the guard position. With the greatest respect to Daniel, he's an abnormal human being in terms of the size of the man and then therefore how he moves. So you do have to find that guy. What you really need on the offensive line, I think, is what they need on the defensive line too. It's a tone setter. It's someone who is bigger, who is more physical, who is tough and competitive, and you get that out of Ione. Like, you can see him block defensive backs. Like, it's like the Blind Side film, the Michael Orr thing, where they showed him from high school driving a defensive back like 60 yards off the ball and then dumping him over the hoardings into the stands. Like, you can see I only do that on film. So there's plenty of nasty and toughness to him. And so you kind of think, actually, can I live with like some slight downside there, because you can just see how effective he is and how much of a tone setter he would be. I think that sort of comes into the argument a little bit.
So yeah, drafting a guard at 14 overall just doesn't sit well with me either. So, like, I have to admit, but like, when I'm looking at these styles of players, obviously I'm going to put more emphasis on if they can run outside zone. But I don't know how much I'm going to drop guys who project better, of course, in power schemes, but can handle the outside zone okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe some development, because I think to a point we're scarred with the lack of mobility that we've gotten, that we don't overdo it. So, James, last topic before I let you go. Our friend Jason Zarotniak, Mr. I Saw a Rotten Yak himself, I believe it was in the chat, in the live chat and on Wednesday shows, said I should get you on to talk about Rick Minter a little bit. James, I'm gonna put you on the spot here because I don't have a real specific question, but Rick Minter, Jesse Minter's dad, obviously has about 50 years coaching experience, I believe. Is in his 70s, is following his son Jesse, was a defensive consultant for the LA Chargers and on Jesse's defensive staff. Now he's coming to the Ravens as a senior consultant. What do you see his role being? What's the benefit of him bringing on? And also, James, I know a lot of fans coming out of the Harbaugh era, and we've expressed our feelings on that. They're scarred, like the nepotism thing keeps coming up. Any worries from you that that Jesse is bringing. I'm going to answer the first part first. Jesse Minter has shown me that he's willing to go out and get the best person for the job, whether he has any connection with them or not. So bringing Pops over and having him oversee some stuff, being somebody he can lean on, an open ear to talk to me, sounds like a great idea. This is not drafting Ben Mason. This is not just hiring Willie Taggart again. To me, this is a pretty cool thing to have Rick Minter in the building. But what do you know about Rick in general? I'll just ask you like that.
I think it's interesting. So I like following. Obviously, the main thing I do is the draft and everything. But what I do like is I like following. I think the Ravens have a good history of hiring young assistant coaches that have come into the building. They've developed them. They've gone on to other things. And so I like following some of those guys in their careers. And that group that came when Wink took over, Mike McDonald, Chris Hewitt, Jesse Minter, those guys, I've been intrigued to follow their career. So I followed Minter's career a little bit, and so sort of knew about this stuff and had spent a decent amount of time looking into their past and what had happened. And his path with Rick is quite interesting. Like there's lots of people talking about like the Harbaugh coaching tree, right? Like, I don't think Jesse Minter is from his dad's coaching tree, let's be clear. And John Harbaugh is a little bit from not necessarily from the Rick Minter coaching tree, but John Harbaugh coached with Rick Minter at Cincinnati. So did Wink Martindale, by the way. So did Mike Tomlin, by the way. And Jesse Minter and Mike Tomlin was an early mentor for Minter, for Jesse, that is. Rick Minter's just been everywhere, man. Like he's had such a wealth of experience. He's worked with some amazing coaches over the years. You know, he worked on Lou Holtz's staff. He worked on Charlie Weiss's staff at Notre Dame. He was Cincinnati's head coach for a long time and had a kind of all-world staff with him. Like he's a really interesting guy in and of himself and brings such a ridiculous amount of expertise and experience to the Ravens. And like having him come on, I wondered whether he would come on as a defensive analyst or whether he would just be dad of the head coach. But he's definitely going to be around and contributing, and that can only be really good for the Ravens, just because of his history and what he's done. But I think the really interesting thing that I found is his relationship with Jesse. He and Jesse's mom split up when Jesse was young, and Jesse's link to his dad has always been through coaching. And it's interesting when they talk about what's really, I think, something that's been less reported is that something that's been very reported has been those 98 rejections that he keeps, that he kept from when he first applied to be a coach at the college level. What's little known about that is that at the end, those 98 rejections, he didn't need to get any of those rejections. He could have just walked straight onto his dad's staff at Notre Dame. At that time, Rick Minter was the defensive coordinator on Charlie Weiss's teams at Notre Dame. He could have just walked straight into that staff. Like his dad would have taken him with open arms. And in fact, there was a plan for him to sort of go through. Actually, when Rick Minter went to Cincinnati, there was a plan for him to progress as a coach there. So those 98 rejections were Jesse Minter desperately trying not to have nepotism. Like they were him desperately trying to chart his own path. And even when he had a ready-made job straight to walk into with his dad, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to go. And so the most impressive thing for me about those 98 rejections was that Jesse Minter tried 98 times to not be the beneficiary of nepotism, which is impressive, right? And then to then go and leave his dad's influence very quickly in his coaching career to go to Indiana State, which his dad then came along later, to Georgia State, when his dad then came along and worked for him at a later date. There was a real, and then to go from a defensive coordinator and an FBS program, granted Georgia State, but an FBS program, to then go and be a defensive assistant in the NFL, well away from your father. I mean, I know that there was some influence between, I know that Rick did call John Harbaugh and talk to him about Jesse, but the fact that I think that was in the general course of hiring Jesse, like I think the fact that he went and kept trying to chart his own path and then went to go and work for Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, which was just a random, like there was no connection there at all. and to go and try and work at Vandy, like that's a real tough job. And I mean, I've seen all the Netflix documentaries about Clark Lee. I'd probably follow him anywhere as well. But it was an interesting choice. And it feels like throughout his career, he's made those choices to not just sit with his dad in the cushy number that he could do, and to really try and push the boundaries of his coaching career. And so this is the big thing I think you've seen play out in the coaching hires, which is that Jesse Minter, yes, will just get the right guy for the job, but also he's a very, very experienced coach. He's coordinated defenses for nearly 10 years at the college and the pro level, even though he's only 42. And he's got all of these connections from his dad too, that he's able to take advantage of. I'm sure there are plenty of coaches that have been hired where you can't even see the connections, but there is some somewhere in the Minters past. And so this has been a really interesting hiring process, I think, because there was always a lot of people down on Jack Harbaugh and his presence in the building and who's got it better than us stuff. But like there's been a real, I think there has been a real advantage for Jesse's career to having his dad, and not in the way that you think, where it's just Jesse gets handed everything because his dad's the coach. So it's just a really interesting connection between him and his dad, and yeah, one that I think the Ravens should benefit from for a few years now.
Maybe you guys can get him on the UK Ravens podcast. I mean, you guys big shots over there now, right?
Could certainly try. We've had quite a few good guests now, so maybe I'll reach out to him and play him this clip, and then reach out to him and say, "Do you want to come on?"
I have not been invited to the UK podcast. I have not.
Jason, you should be, and we will do. That is a really good point and a big oversight.
You know what? Draft season, man, because that's where I really want to talk ball with you.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Every time I see Brandon Coleman in a Commander's uniform, I think of James, and it's just you don't get those kind of connections often elsewhere with people, because I remember James and I disagreed on him, and he seemed to be doing okay with the Commanders. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I scouted him, but on the Commanders, but I saw him play. They come on TV a lot here in Baltimore because a lot of DC fans, the proximity. So I have watched some Brandon Coleman out of TCU, I believe, right, James?
Yeah, it was him. Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great to get you on during draft season as well, because we've it's not just me, it's Gordon McGuinness as well from PFF, Gordon. He's a good proper tape watcher as well, not just the stats guy. So yeah,
I've talked with Gordon. I've messaged Gordon a bunch of times before. Really good hearted guy. Yeah. Even when I'm upset with a certain grade from somebody, he's right there, man. You're like, okay, all right. So yeah, he's a great Gordon McGuinness, great ambassador for PFF and everything they do. I mean, just awesome.
And also, if you follow him on Blue Sky, he's been promoting a bit more his Ravens Minute, which is a quick 5-minute article that he writes every day now that lands in your inbox from the blog post website thing. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, he's that's really cool. So go out, check it out, and subscribe. It's really good.
So James Ogden, Russell Street Report, Ravens UK podcast, and the Red Star Baltimore. Did they get that right?
And that's where my draft guide drops every year as well.
Yeah, buddy.
It comes in April. So yeah.
Yeah. So you have James' draft guide you can go to. You'll have my big board, Raven centric big board. Try to do more and more every year. And James, we have the time difference between us, but hopefully coming this draft season, man, we can get together a couple of times and agree on some prospects, maybe disagree on some prospects, and really dig in, because it's a small community compared to, you can get somebody to talk about what happens at the NFL level very easily, but someone that digs into hundreds of prospects in the draft every year, it's hard to find that, and the early feel on this draft, James, I don't feel like the Ravens will get anyone close to like a Kyle Hamilton type. Not the Kyle Hamilton that we know now, the Kyle Hamilton that came out of Notre Dame. I don't think we're going to get a prospect anywhere near what level Kyle was.
No, I don't think so. I think I mentioned the only guy that I can see falling like that, which is Caleb Downs, and that's because of positional scarcity again, and it's unlikely that they end up drafting a positional value, and it's unlikely that they end up drafting a safety again in the first round. Right. I just think it's really unlikely. So at that point, you sort of do rule that out. And then And then when you look at the other positions, it's just, I suppose it depends a little bit on how you feel about the receivers. Like there's potentially going to be a receiver that maybe drops looking at needs early on in the draft, and maybe that's a guy that people like. But I don't think that the receivers for me raise to the level of like getting a top 5 guy at 14 type thing. Like when the Ravens got Hamilton, I was praying for Olave to drop. I love Chris Olave, and like there's. Like that's not happened. Like, I don't think that's happening. There isn't a Chris Olave in this draft, and I don't know that it's happening. So I think you're right. I don't necessarily see who the guy is that is going to fall to them at 14 for whatever reason. It just feels a bit unlikely unless there is a ridiculous notion with Ruben Bain about his arm length, and that ends up pushing him down, and the Ravens can pounce, but that feels just extremely unlikely at this point.
It seems unlikely, yeah. I look at the top of that draft, and it just seemed the 2022 draft, the top say 7, 8 guys were pretty darn good. And then what? Jameson Williams came in and got snuck in. Olave snuck in. Wasn't that a Garrett Wilson draft? Like,
yeah, it was. Yeah.
Any one of those guys would be probably wide receiver 1 in this class.
Yeah.
And I can go to other positions and say the same thing. So like, yeah, Kyle Hamilton level prospect, I don't think is sneaking through the cracks here and falling to the Ravens at 14 like it did in 2022. So we got a lot to talk about. But James, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to my football family. Highlights still coming out. I believe they're all over 40 of them. We got 40 Ravens, James, that qualified for highlights this year. 1 a day, 6 p.m. So if you want to support the channel, just like and subscribe. James got the merch, bro.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Got some merch. They requested it, man. And some biscuit, they bought it, man. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, man. And so if you want to support the channel, just subscribe is the main thing. Other than that, we do have channel memberships available if you want to support the content. Obviously, James, all 22 footage is demonetized now, so I don't make anything from the actual videos. So channel memberships are very important too. But James, man, thanks so much for coming on, bro. It's just taking time out of your night with the little one and the late night. I really appreciate this, man.
No problem at all, Jason. I love talking to you always about this stuff, and yeah, would be awesome to get on with you again. Talk draft.
Yeah, don't be a stranger, man. There's only so many draft enthusiasts in the world that do podcasts and cover it. So there's a need for it out there. I know plenty of people on the channel are into the draft. So yeah, man, let's not be a stranger. Let's exchange ideas. Let's fight each other on some things. Give each other some things to think about. Like that, everything of that is fun because I know you're very open-minded. You're going to listen and you're going to go back and check, and you do the same thing for me. So I love that, man. Thanks so much, James.
No problem, Jason. Nice to talk to you.
Love my football family. Thank you to my football family. James, please say goodnight.
Good night, everyone.